Happy New Year's Day. Today is the ending of a decade. Exciting time. Um, Maybe also scary for most of us. I know that a lot of us are probably looking at different struggles, battles we're going to face during this time of 2020, and also just the unknown, just the facing things that we've never faced before in the year 2020. But aside from that, Happy New Year's Day. It is the hopefully beginning of what will be a better decade, better decade for anyone who experienced a rough decade from 2010 to 2019. And we all set up goals and New Year's resolutions in order to try to better ourselves each year. And I find that as the joke typically plays out, most people don't follow through with New Year's resolutions, or they don't end up keeping them. And that's why I'm typically against New Year's resolutions. I have the mindset that if you decide to make a change, then you make a change when it becomes apparent to you that change should be made. That's my mindset, at least. And I think that's probably the better way of operating. But as far as New Year's resolutions go, I don't particularly find an issue with setting goals or resolutions for yourselves for the year, as long as you're not using it as an excuse in order to push off something that you know you should be doing. Just say, I'll start New Year's, because I hear that all the time when it comes to dieting or when it comes to working out. You talk to someone during Christmas and they say, hey, why am I going to start now? It's the holidays. I want to enjoy myself. I'll just wait till New Year's. It's like, yeah, fine, whatever. But keep in mind that you can still do those things. You can still maintain a diet. You can still work out. You can still hit cardio in the morning and then the weights at night. And then watch your food intake all the hours in between. But I think there's just a lack of dedication, a lack of motivation, and it's not quite motivation, because motivation is a short-lived sort of an experience. It's dedication when it comes to those sorts of things. Being able to maintain strict rules when it comes to dieting, or being able to maintain strict rules when it comes to when you get up so you can work out before you go to work. There's just no one who's quite dedicated, or at least they're people who are few and far in between, and especially in my circle, there's just not many of those whom I can talk with and really relate to about those sorts of things. But that's besides the point. I think one of the main things for me is moving on from past sorts of experiences, and I suppose this is in relation to New Year's resolutions. As it occurred to me yesterday, counting down to the new year, I in some ways, sort of an unhappy person, but not particularly. I have a lot of things going for me. I don't discount those at all. I think you can get very distracted by the sorts of things that bother you and discount the sorts of things that, are something that maybe you have as advantage in your life. So I think for me, the priority goal of this year is simply focusing on the sorts of things that are advantages, and also trying to analyze and work through and really, you might say, negotiate in some way with these sorts of issues, such as like self-worth. It's like, how do you, for what exact reason do you have this issue? Why do you think that, there's no purpose, there's no meaning? It's like, work through that and ask yourself, do you think that is true because you place too much emphasis on what others think of you, and that you're basing the meaning and the purpose of the world, essentially, off of the crowd and off of the mob and off of the opinions of others. It's like, if so, then you should probably try to decide and determine what sorts of things you value. So in that way, set up sort of a meaningful, purposeful existence that you have yourself created. So that is to say, finding values that you yourself would want to hold, and then going about and upholding those, even if it means, say, going against what the crowd or the mob might deem worthy of following or not. So that's just sort of one of my own resolutions. Is I think I would call it a resolution, just hardly a resolution, more of just a lifetime goal, if you will, of trying to really work through myself and examine myself to determine these sorts of values that I deem worthy of pursuing, and then pursuing those regardless of opinion which is held concerning that value. So that's something I'm certainly considering doing, and I am trying to do that, and I think that can be very difficult. We can just talk about what the difficulties with that sort of endeavor is. Like, first you have family, you have people who you are close with based upon the situation in which you were born into. It's like you can't really change that, and you have to deal with those people. It's not to say that family is a sort of a problem you have to deal with, but in a sense it is sort of a problem you have to deal with, and that's true in more than one sense. That's true not only in the values that you hold, that's true in the opinions that you cultivate, that's true in the habits you have when it comes to diet, when it comes to exercise, when it comes to living in general, just habits, the habitual processes of life. So family is something to be treasured, if you have that and if you have that connection, whereas I recognize many people do not, and that's that's rough stuff to not have family growing up and not have those people accessible. But everyone has, to a certain degree, has a figure which is familial in some sense. I think most people, I would say, and you have to deal with, especially becoming older and going off and developing your own opinions and going off and developing your new habits and coming upon these new values and making them virtues and then pursuing them. You will butt heads, certainly, with, you might say, your elders, if you want to talk mythologically. You go out and you discover new things, and you come back, and there's sort of a dissonance in the ways in which, say, the society, the group being you and then the elders as a collective unit, there's a dissonance between the way you all represent yourselves. Not only represent yourselves, but the things you are representing. So that causes all sorts of potential issues and arguments, and frankly that can be difficult, especially when you're trying your darndest to work through some of these just hard topics and issues that one typically deals with when they go about a journey that is similar to this. And of course, this is in talking about trying to determine what these values as a whole mean to you, and why you should, not only after recognizing that they are things you want to pursue, but why you should pursue those things. So it's a multifaceted sort of an investigation and analysis of what you should pursue, why you should pursue it, and ultimately you would hope to come out with some sort of answer in the end. But I think if you ask those questions truly and deeply enough, you come to understand and realize that there is in fact no answer, but it's sort of in a Kierkegaardian sense. You can find that answer for yourself at least, and that kind of brings us to another interesting sort of a topic, is that we have take it, be it authors, be it YouTubers, be it podcasters, entrepreneurial figures who have these sorts of guidelines and rules set up in order to put you in the best place in your life. The 3 S's: sloppy, sandwich, sucks, like whatever, and or the 5 R's. Like, they have these success steps. So, like, you have to do this in order to get here, in order to get this. And it's like, no. It's like you're telling me, you're giving me a cookie cutter response. First of all, I highly doubt that you in fact follow those 3 S's yourself. Secondly, you're giving me a prescription to go and act out that works for you, if it does in fact work for you, but may not work for me. We don't all walk the same sort of a journey in life. We go through very different experiences, and we require different things in order to not only keep us going, but to make sense of the past and to relate that into a meaningful flow into the future. And that's part of what the understanding of values is looking back in the past and trying to make sense of that, and giving yourself sort of a story, a mythological understanding of this thing that's traveling through time, and then trying to give it a theme, and then from that theme extracting pieces of information and experience from your past, putting that into a schema of yourself, and then projecting that schema forwards. That is to say, I think I'm X, and I have examples A, B, C, D, which I can use to construct my view of X. And then I'm assuming that I want to be Y in the future. So then I'm trying to understand how I can take these experiences and my identity as X into something that is different, or continue to be X but maybe better X improved. So because of the subjective sort of relationship that one undergoes with one's past, it is hard for me to see that any sort of system in which one is saying, you first must do this in order to do this, is at all useful. That is not to knock, of course, systems or structures that people can use in order to reset their life or to create a foundation in which they can work off of. Those things are very important. So say the 3S's in that regard could be a great thing, and that it gets someone pursuing a greater thing in life, and it also gets them moving towards a goal, and it pushes them to find structure, and then that push to find structure becomes a search within the past of the sort of the chaotic past, and then they're trying to rearrange that and make it meaningful. If that is exactly what they're searching for, maybe they have that figured out, and they just need a push to have structure in their life, and then there you go. So certainly those sorts of things are not bad, but they can be detrimental in that they often neglect the subjective user of said program and kind of force them into this way of looking at life where it's like, you should look at life this way. It's like, no, probably really what you should do is look at multiple people and determine what are the most successful sorts of attributes that they have, and then compare that with your own subjective interaction with what you want to become or what you have been, and from what you have been, what you are becoming. Take those sorts of successful attributes and then take from those which are the best and which are the most conducive in order to facilitate the sort of growth into the person you want to become, and then just collect all that together, put it in a system, follow the system, and there you go. The hard thing, of course, is sticking to the system and following it. That's the real kicker. We all have ideas and values that we want to uphold that we often fail in doing so. And I don't think we should strive. I just broke a pin head. I don't think we should strive necessarily for perfection. And it's like, obviously you can't pursue that sort of a thing because it's simply out of range, out of possibilities. But I think that the exercise of looking towards and looking forwards the perfect version of yourself is a useful exercise, and it also keeps you in check. It allows you to see, exactly what you're capable of, even though it's an idealized form of yourself looking for perfection, that, you will strive for that but never achieve it. And I think that as long as you understand that, I think you'd be okay with that. And I think that comes a lot from just probably our ideas about what sorts of things are considered good, and that we typically place on pedestals things which are the most perfect, things which have the least flaws, things which execute the task in the way in which contains the least amount of errors. And although that is a great way of ranking things, it is not perhaps the most useful way of ranking things which are, you might say, prone to making errors all the time. That is the human condition, is that we fault, we folly, we make errors. So it's just a recognition that you're gonna fail. And I've yet to really hit the place in which I feel like, oh, I've made it. We're not failing anymore. I think it's and sometimes even if you're not failing, it's also just a recognition that I can be better. Sure, you did this much today, but tomorrow you can probably do this much. Or if you did, so say here's a metaphor, like if you work out, you did this much for this set, and the next set you do more, and you think, because I did more this set than I did last set, I could have probably done more the whole entire workout or the whole entire set. I could have given more on set 1 as I did in set 2, and I'd be in a better position. It's just that recognition and that sort of self-analysis that allows you to be comfortable with that sort of idyllic perfection, and then use that as a sort of motivation in order to push you further, knowing full well that you will never arrive at that idyllic perfection. This is the second point of that, I suppose, is that it's important for one to then have goals which he or she can actually achieve, because the pursuit of perfection and its, you might say, unattainable nature is that it can become discouraging to pursue that. So that one should create small goals, or at least goals which are obtainable, that they can then go about pursuing, which gives you a little reward, you're excited, you hit the goal. So it's like, you're working out, you have this unobtainable standard that you want to hit, but you set your goals every month. I want to get my bench press 10 pounds higher, or whatever it may be. So you want to hit 275. That's your bench press. You want to be able to hit 275. And you hit that, you feel good, and you're like, now it's time for 290. So then you go for 290. All the meanwhile, you have this sort of idyllic perfection of like, this is what I should look like, this is what I should bench press. But setting those small goals, you're hitting things, you're doing things, you're making progress, and you're working towards a better sense of yourself. So, New Year's resolutions, folks, what I'd recommend for you, just from me, my personal experience, you can do whatever the hell you want, I don't know. What I recommend for you, go out and have a serious sit down talk with yourself. Sit alone for a nice hour and determine what are the sorts of things that you are involved in. What sorts of things do you want to become involved in? What values do you hold? Why do you hold them? What values do you want to make central in your life? And then through that process, you should start to see also the influence of external forces as well as the influence of internal forces. And for me, I try to focus on internal forces as best I can while keeping in mind the importance of external forces. So that is to say, I recognize that I have an idea of myself, but I also understand that the world, or those whom I interact with, also have an idea of myself. So I try to compromise, and typically that comes out in the form of, say, I'm trying to uphold this idea that I have for myself, but because I recognize that you, person A, has an idea about me that you expect me to do X thing, when I am with you, I will attempt to make accommodations to the best of my abilities without compromising this idea I have of myself in order to best fulfill the expectations that you have of me. And that isn't to say that so a person expects you to act in reason or in way X, and you act in that way just because they expect you. It's not you're not doing it simply out of the expectation. You're doing it out of the expectation and out of the understanding that that person also has this sort of idyllic version of themselves. Preferably, I would sure hope they do. If they don't, then they probably need to get that sorted out. I think everyone has that sort of internally placed within them, but who knows? And through that recognition that, you know, they're a person acting out this game also in this little play, and they have their themes and you have your themes, that, you know, you're trying to also produce the sort of life that is most conducive to them, to get them also to that state of becoming closer to that idyllic perfective goal. So it's just through that recognition you have to act not only in your best interest but the best interest of everyone else. And sometimes that results in compromises that aren't exactly fun or that aren't exactly where you'd like to be, but it's one of those moments where you understand that the best thing possible that you could do would be acting in this way, and yet you may not want to do it. You know you should, so you do it. But that isn't to say you should betray your virtues or values in any way. You should uphold those indefinitely. So that is a Happy New Year's recommendation for me. Sit down with yourself, think about what you believe in, why you believe in it. Try to best set up a way in which you can go about achieving the sort of thing that would result from the things you believe in, and then work on compromising with the world about the thing that you believe in order to best set everyone else up to accomplish whatever else they have created for themselves. So good day. Happy New Year's. It's good evening here, but good day to you if it's day. Good night to you if it's night.